What is going on? I'm Jeff St. Pierre, and this is episode 103 of the Adult Education Podcast. This week, I'm speaking with tech reporter and journalist Mark Bergen. Thanks so much for checking out the show. I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to listen to Adult Education. Now, this show is all about learning new things, or maybe more about some topics you're already familiar with. I speak with experts across all fields to learn more about health, education, technology, mental health, and really just about anything. If you'd like to support adult education, the best way to do so is to leave a 5-star rating on whatever platform you're listening on. And if you like what you hear, please share it with your friends. I love how word of mouth can inspire new people to check out the program. YouTube. We all know what it is. In fact, there's a strong possibility that you use it on a daily basis. Whether it's just for laughs, to learn something new, or to find out what's coming soon to theaters, you can find just about anything you want on YouTube. But where did it come from? How did it become this massive juggernaut in the tech world? Does it get the credit it deserves for completely changing the internet game? We're going to talk about YouTube with tech reporter and journalist Mark Bergen. He spent the last 2+ years interviewing current and former YouTube employees, creators, and so many more to find out the story about YouTube, what's really going on there. He published his work in a book called Like, Comment, Subscribe, Inside YouTube's Chaotic Rise to World Domination. This book is fascinating. I know I say that about a lot of books I read. This one really just gripped me from the very start. I don't think people understand how critical YouTube has been to our society. It's not only changed the way we use the internet, it's also created all kinds of new industries and created jobs for millions of people, not to mention really being the basic ideas behind things like TikTok, Vine, Instagram, and more. Now, whether you love all those things or not, you have to give credit to YouTube for being the foundation for a lot of the things that we currently use on a daily basis here today. We talk about all these things in our conversation. I hope you enjoy my time with Mark Bergen.
Mark, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, the pleasure is mine. This is one of those fascinating topics that I feel like everybody uses but don't know a single thing about primarily.
There you go. That's my pitch.
Mark, the book is called Like, Comment, Subscribe, Inside YouTube's Chaotic Rise to World Domination. I don't know if YouTube gets enough credit for essentially completely changing the game when it comes to content and social media. I mean, they were one of the first big things that came out. And, you know, like anything, like even in music, when someone creates a new sound, they rarely get the popularity that will come down the line. So it's interesting how much we use it, but people don't really think about how it is the thing that kind of set us down the path.
Yeah, I mean, sort of someone compared it to like an iceberg that we just sits there, or a sleeping giant in social media. So, YouTube it did transform the way entertainment and media works, in part just the way it was structured. Right? It's been free from day one, and the idea is that information should be free, and media should be free, as a sort of founding philosophy at the company. And that had a lot of resistance from traditional
Sure.
media and legal resistance. And it's also sort of set the direction of social media. YouTube was the first platform, and still to this day, kind of the only one really doing paying online creators at any meaningful scale. They started doing that in 2007, and now you're seeing, we're seeing Spotify, Twitch, Snapchat, TikTok, and Facebook, Instagram, all trying to replicate that model of, we're going to actually build a system where we can share revenue with the users who are generating our media. And that's something where I feel like it's so important to study the history of YouTube, because it's sort of repeating itself on other platforms.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things you mentioned is that other platforms really haven't been able to mimic what YouTube does. And a lot of people that use YouTube, creators and all that, they kind of like on a whole scale, they like the way that YouTube compensates, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly in the history of the company, there've been rough patches.
Sure.
And we had, the book talks about 5 years ago, there was a major boycott of advertisers, and then on YouTube it was called the Adpocalypse. Great name. And just overnight, like the online creators, their incomes just fell, like the rug got pulled out beneath them. For many of, like almost all of them, nothing that they did, like the ones who were not violating any of YouTube's rules, or really like making stuff that was very advertiser safe, they got impacted. And that happens all the time. And I think the company has certainly made a lot of progress since then. What I showed in the book, and I was really interesting in the reporting, is that like the online create, despite the fact that built this world, it is pretty foreign to them as a company, and Google as a company. Like, they don't excel at people skills, and they don't do like talent management. Someone told me in the book, like, Google throws software at a problem; they don't throw people. And so to this day, you still don't really, if your video has an issue, it's usually an automated email. There's no customer support line, and unless you have millions of subscribers, you don't have like a point person you can call the company, and that's just sort of the way it has been, and probably the way it always will be.
That's kind of an interesting subject or an interesting line of thought there. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you obviously know a lot more about it than I do. But it seems to me that the creators, the major creators, if you will, are almost the ones designing YouTube, because they're the ones that are going to complain, or they're going to have a comment for them as a company and say like, hey, this isn't working for us. Can you take a look at this? And YouTube will listen to them because they're the ones that are driving a lot of the viewership on the site. But there aren't as many people behind the scenes that are kind of working on that stuff for Google or YouTube. You know what I mean? Like, it kind of feels like the users are the ones that are deciding what's wrong and what's right for it. And then YouTube and Google are like, okay, sure, we'll take a look at that.
I mean, they're certainly pretty responsive to their advertisers, who are their primary. YouTube is an advertising business. Its primary customer is the advertisers, and so in the history, like, they've been creators have pointed out sort of things that, like, issues that they find as a problem, and sometimes YouTube has been slow or non-responsive, and then it's often responded to advertisers, and that's the way, like, the way that these companies work. I think YouTube is more responsive now to creators, in part because of the competition they're facing from TikTok,
Yeah.
and from other platforms, and so they're worried about, they're worried about some of their big stars going to Spotify as and going to TikTok, and so that's forced them to put more resources and pay more attention. And I think probably a good thing for online creators, and probably for viewers.
The mystery behind YouTube and the way Google is a part of it too is kind of fascinating, in that you really don't know. When you look at Facebook, you've got Mark Zuckerberg. When you look at different organizations, now I'm drawing a blank on all of them, of course. When you look at some of these, you have like a face that you can pinpoint and go, okay, that's the person that I'm learning from. That's who I'm going to be talking to, Apple and all that. But with YouTube and Google, there really isn't someone. It's just the logo. Like, that's it. That's the YouTube logo. And like, that's where I'm going to watch some videos today.
Yeah, I think that's been it's almost an intentional. I think I talk about this in the book a little bit. So YouTube is run by Susan Wojcicki and has been run by, she's been the chief executive since 2014. Google was founded in her garage. She has been at the company for a very long time, and is one of, like, the senior Google executives, and still very, very Google. She one of her, before YouTube, she built their, like, AdSense program that monetizes online blogs and publishers. I think she stayed out. Like, she doesn't have a public persona. Most people on the street wouldn't know who she is, and most people in Washington D.C. don't know who she is. And I think that's very savvy of the company. And in some ways, she's also, like I argue in the book, like, not, she certainly makes decisions, and she can steer the company in particular directions. But in many ways, like, YouTube is set on a course, and the platform moves sort of in ways that the company can't control.
You mentioned something there too, that people in Washington, D.C. don't even really know who she is. And social media, and I will lump YouTube into a social media category, but social media has come under fire a lot over the last 5 or 6 years, especially with just the spread of misinformation. And again, Facebook's at the forefront of that. Other things are at the forefront of that. YouTube certainly has been mentioned, but they're not the name that people associate with sort of the evil that's going on online. But the way the algorithm works on YouTube, it can very easily set people down, or, a vortex of misinformation with the videos that pop up. So it's also interesting to me that they are not more of a focus on this.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote the book in part to pay more attention to this sleeping giant. I think, I mean, one reason for that, I think, is just a structural reason. Like, most people, myself included, like, my experience with YouTube is, like, I mean, I'm actually now, like, I have creators that I follow, and I'm, like, a big fan of certain niches, but, like, I will typically use it as to look up something like a archival video or how to. I don't, it's not like Facebook, where you might see a relative posting something political or something you disagree with, right? Um, And its video is very hard to it is hard to moderate. It's hard to it just takes a lot more work and effort to understand the context and the conversations and as a like moderate, you mentioned misinformation, like they are it like these are hard problems that the company set up for themselves, and video is harder to identify what is when it's misinformation and when there's a conspiracy than just a tweet or a
Sure.
Facebook post. And so I think that's a major reason why YouTube just hasn't been is kind of criminally understudied.
Yeah, I mean, a handful of words in a post on Facebook or Twitter or something is easier to flag versus a 10-minute video where, like, are you going to actually have people watching
Yeah,
all 10 minutes of every single video that comes out? Probably not. So it's going to be a lot more difficult to catch that.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
interesting how that all works. I mean, I primarily use YouTube to watch clips of like late night TV shows because I can never stay up late enough to watch them. So so for me, like I'll watch Colbert and then it will suggest Kimmel, then it will suggest Seth Meyers. I'm like, all right, that's fine. Like this is a rabbit hole I can go down and I'll have a great time today and get a few
hmm
laughs. But like you get stuck on one thing that's wrong and like all of a sudden your suggested videos are going to change drastically, you know?
Yeah, I mean the company has made a lot of changes in that in recent years after some like the pressures you mentioned, like the pressure in the press from I talk about in the book, like there was a lot of pressure internally from employees being like we should deal with this issue. You know, Google is a company that prides itself on information. And so there's this deep, like darkly comedic part of the book, which is like the world's biggest company that's like trying, organizing the world information is Google's motto. Has this video service that often fed people like flat Earth conspiracy theories, right? It became very popular on YouTube for a while. So what the company's response is to what they invent a category they called borderline videos, and that's if it's a video that doesn't break the rules but is potentially kind of getting them into trouble or perhaps potential harms. For a while, like they treated videos about vaccines, kind of dubious videos about vaccines this way, and then last year after they started to be much stricter, and that's a powerful tool because the recommendation engine is a powerful way, and it drives a lot of the video traffic. Like you said on YouTube, like what they've shared is over 70% of all views come from those recommendations. So you
Sure.
remove a video from that system, it basically is a way to kind of kneecap its distribution. Um, but as you know, the creators often don't know when that happens. You or I, as a viewer, don't know when we're watching a video. Oh, this is borderline from like the company has deemed this as a borderline video. So what the systems they have in place are still pretty opaque.
One of the things I thought was really interesting too, while reading through the book, they have algorithms and all that now, and obviously YouTube has changed over the years that it's been around. So now, like when I open it up, the only thing that I really see are basically sports talk shows and late night talk shows, and maybe the occasional music video or something. But 10,
Mhm.
15 years ago, and if you were opening it up, there were a different set of people that were kind of deciding what was going to pop on that homepage.
Yeah, I didn't know that when I started reporting. There was a team of they called them community managers. Like the nickname that one of them had was Cool Hunters, and they were like picking out they were picking out videos to live on the homepage, and they made her Jack Conti runs Patreon. Pomplamoose is his band. Like that was another one of many examples. Like his video, like someone at YouTube found it. It was a really an amazing, delightful cover, and launch careers. And I think like had I talk about this in the book, they were able to they treated the site sort of this is our community of users and viewers, and I think a bit more protective. And then, but at the time, Google, for a couple of reasons, they kind of disbanded that system and replaced it with algorithms. In part because Google just like didn't want to replicate that in every country in the world. And software is cheaper, and they also thought that they didn't want gatekeepers picking what videos people would watch,
Yeah.
and so that you're much more inclined to maybe to like those YouTube when you visit YouTube and it's based on your viewing history, you're probably going to want to watch those videos that pop up, and they're exceptionally good at optimizing. Like they built their systems to optimize for you not just clicking through and watching, but like watching as long as you can.
I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but I want to go back to the early days of YouTube, really when it was kind of founded. And I thought one of the interesting things too that I read was, the flip cameras, the video flip cameras were largely like one of the inspirations for YouTube. And I just got taken back to so many like nightmares in my office of our bosses, like, go outside, take the flip camera, film something, go do something. because they had no idea how any of it worked at the time. They're like, "Oh, we'll just put a video online; it'll go viral." I'm like, "Stop it! That is not."
And so, I mean, the part of the reason that TikTok has taken off is because it's easier. It's like simpler to upload videos with your phone on
Yeah.
TikTok. And I think that's something that the companies that were like Vine before TikTok was the first this wake up moment for YouTube, where there's I talk about this a lot in the book. There's this really interesting tension between YouTube, like in one way, it's pushing people to have higher production value because you're competing. If you're an online creator, you're competing with Jimmy Kimmel, and you're competing with like TV studios that have a lot of money and green screens and like production. And then on the other side, TikTok comes around and it's like, oh, it's super cheap and easy just to post a video with your phone. And YouTube wants all of it, right? It wants to have the cake and eat it too. And so and now they're leaning in on, they have YouTube Shorts, and they're trying to convince people that it is just as simple. You can do kind of editing, complex editing, and make videos just on your phone. And I mean, people, TikTok and YouTube Shorts is a really great example where people are coming up with like phenomenally creative, innovative, weird ways to entertain.
One of the reasons YouTube has been so successful, though, at least in my opinion, and I think you probably share a similar thought, is how easy it is to use, and how anybody can log on to YouTube and use that and figure out how to play a video, figure out how to search for a video. It is very, very, very user friendly. So I understand, like, it might be easier for people to use TikTok to upload. So maybe YouTube has to figure out a better way to navigate that world. But like overall, as a site, I mean, the reason everybody uses it is because of how easy it is.
Yes, it was absolutely a reason why it was so successful early on. And the core sort of functionality hasn't really changed in 17 years. And Google they spent a lot of time and energy. At one point, the CEO of Google, sort of like the one thing he would come when he visited YouTube would say, like, make sure there's like no buffering time, like make it as fast as possible. So like which they succeeded in doing. I mean, I think there's a lot of, you can raise a lot of questions about, well, they could have been paying attention to a lot of societal consequences and harms of their platform, but instead they were very focused on optimizing their product to make it as seamless as possible. And in that way, they succeeded.
Anytime somebody sends me a link with a Vimeo video in it, I'm like, oh God, like this is going to take forever. Do I have time for this? And you're right. I mean, YouTube, and no disrespect to Vimeo, I understand. I respect it as a platform, but you're right. YouTube has found a way to remove the buffering, to remove all of the different things, and just to make it like click and start, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Vimeo is really originally tailored for like creatives and filmmakers, and a lot of early YouTubers were that type. And I talked to some who have kind of burned out and left, and they're like, YouTube is great if you just want to churn out content. It is not good if you're trying to make something creative and artistic. And I think that's the sacrifice that the company's made.
Well, let's talk about creating for a minute, because there's actually like a little description of your book on the cover. It says, the definitive, deeply reported account of YouTube, the company that upended media, culture, industry, and democracy. We already kind of talked about democracy a little bit with the misinformation thing, but industry, I mean, they have changed and created so many different jobs. I mean, the idea of content creator basically comes from YouTube. Like that's essentially where that comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand, myself included, like a lot of the YouTube creators are not just running a show by themselves in their basement, right? They have like production studios, they have staff, they have editors, they have, Mr. Beast is, and if your audience knows, like the most popular YouTuber right now. I think he's got more than 50 people working for him. Like he's got a big operation, and he's a bit of an outlier, but even, some of the larger, like the most successful kids creators are basically running entertainment studios. And that's absolutely changed the game. And like you talk to some of the YouTubers that went on to work in movies and TV have come back to the platform, and they feel more comfortable having creative control. They like being able to upload when and where they can, as opposed to following whatever a producer and an agent and director tells them to do. I mean, the other like just great example. So YouTube was sued by Viacom early on. Viacom is the parent company of MTV. They were claiming that YouTube was using pirated material. YouTube won that lawsuit. Now I think the most popular show on MTV. I haven't watched MTV in a long time. It is just it's a video, or it's a show that just talks about viral videos.
Ridiculousness.
Like
yes.
There it is. Thank you. It's ridiculousness. It is just YouTube videos. Yeah, it's just so funny to me that this was a company that fought so tooth and nail to like destroy this thing, and is now clearly YouTube has won, not just the lawsuit, but in the culture.
This is an unrelated point, but if you ever get bored and want to Google this, if you look up the daily schedule for MTV online, there are days where literally the only thing on that channel is ridiculousness for 24 hours. They have like nothing else right now but that show at this point.
MTV was the kingmaker kind of around when YouTube was formed, and MySpace was the hottest thing online, and so like it's just remarkable how quickly things have changed.
Well, yeah, I mean, YouTube has kind of taken over the music video aspect. You know what I mean? Like, it totally reinvigorated music videos. They had almost essentially, people were still making them, but no one gave a damn. Like, you barely ever saw them. You'd occasionally see them on a clip show once in a while. Then YouTube rolls around, and now all of a sudden, it's a big business once again. Like, people invest millions into music videos.
Professional boxing has been sort of reinvigorated by like KSI and Logan Paul and Jake Paul, these YouTubers that are now boxing celebrities and stars.
I mentioned earlier that I watch late night clips, and I remember specifically Seth Meyers talking about when they switched to be broadcasting from home during the pandemic. The first couple of weeks were really rough. Obviously, everyone's making a change they weren't expecting, so sure, there's going to be some bumps in the road. But he said they actually reached out to popular YouTubers and said, like, hey, help us. Like, how can we make this look better? How can we do this? And honestly, like, it's increased his viewership on both levels, from TV and online. And I don't understand anyone that doesn't put their clips or their moments on YouTube now, because all it can do is increase your brand at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, as far as the clips and footage, we're still like, the big media companies are also Disney Plus and Paramount. Like, they're all sort of trying to compete in this streaming. And so, this is despite YouTube's efforts. Like, I think in YouTube, in an ideal world, would rather have Disney Plus live on YouTube than on Disney Plus.
Sure.
But studios like Disney have kept their prized IP away from YouTube. I think the calculus there, Disney even invested at one point in a major YouTube studio, and that sort of flailed. So I think you're right that like a lot of late night TV music videos have come on. It's still been, the traditional media was for a long time reluctant to put things on YouTube, and because the economics weren't as great. And I still think that's the thing that YouTube has struggled with, is getting rates for their advertising and other forms of commerce on par with traditional media.
I think my point that I was trying to make is, take out the Disney Pluses, take out the Paramount Pluses and all that. But like, you look at something, just say hypothetically, like the Grammy Awards. Award shows in general, viewership has been way down over the years because people just aren't as interested. But for many years, I remember working at a radio station and going in the next morning to talk about what happened the night before, and you couldn't find clips of the show online. Like, you couldn't go to YouTube and find the videos of the performances, or if you did, it would be removed immediately by YouTube. And I would always think to myself, like, I get it, you want this intellectual property, but at the same time, all this can do is reach another person that didn't watch your show the previous night. And then maybe that inspires them to come back another time, or that inspires them to check out more from that artist. So really, there's no downside to, say, posting a moment from a show or something like that. Yeah, I don't expect Disney to post all their movies on there, but I think from that perspective, like, the CMA Awards, the Country Music Awards, I think there's a lot of benefit to posting that content on there, because you're just reaching an audience maybe that wouldn't watch you.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, that's certainly YouTube's argument.
Forgive my brain here. The timeline of YouTube and Google, when did Google come into play?
Early, super early.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty early.
18 months. So after their launch. It was the fall of 2006 when Google made that acquisition. And my sense is that a primary reason YouTube was a really popular destination, and like Google was trying with Google Video to compete. And it was sort of what they say here in Silicon Valley of like, you either build something or you buy it. YouTube was also, and still remains, a huge search platform. Like, it is just this phenomenal search engine. And I think Google was attracted to YouTube because it was a threat to their search business, and it's like the gatekeeper to the internet, and still this like phenomenal property that they own. Because and you can see that where like YouTube is so vast, and like it's kind of difficult to search for something and not find it there.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, I think about whenever I'm trying to pronounce somebody's name, And you can easily
Yeah,
go to
that's
Google and look
really
it up. But like,
handy.
I go straight to YouTube. Like, there's got to be a news story about this person, and they're going to say it, and I'll be able to say like, okay, well, I watched this on whatever channel, and now I know how to pronounce this person's name.
Yeah.
And when
Yeah,
Google,
I've always wondered about who uploads his videos.
I know, I think it's fantastic. I mean, Google took over. YouTube was still, like you said, it was still so brand new. Like, it's interesting to think like they took it over or they bought it at a time when they were just essentially trying to take a competitor off the market, and they've turned it into this massive financial moneymaker too. I mean, this thing has grown so much.
It has grown so much. I think one thing that I found out in reporting the book was that it wasn't always guaranteed. Like
Yeah.
there was one point in a few years, like 2008 or 2009, where like the chief financial officer at Google was like, this thing is a terrible business, YouTube. Like, why are we invested in this? Right? Like that they weren't profitable. When they really started to become commercially successful about around 2017, they had this massive advertiser boycott and like this big existential crisis, and that forced them to make a whole bunch of changes. But to be clear, like YouTube all they disclose to the public and their financials is their advertising business. We don't know how much money Google spends to pay content moderators.
Sure.
We don't know like the margin, how much they pay to creators. I mean, another fact we don't know how much of YouTube has trumpeted the number that they paid $30 billion to online broadcasters in a 3-year span, which is a huge amount of money. That we don't know how much of that goes to Jimmy Kimmel's station ABC.
Sure.
How much of it goes to Taylor Swift's record label, and then how much of it goes to like you or me if we were to upload a video.
That's the other thing too, because there's a quote about how why can't I think of her name right now? The woman that runs YouTube, that she said
Susan
that
Wojcicki.
thank you, that YouTube is a music site. And I think it's so interesting that that's a thought process. And I know there is a ton of music on there. I mean, every time a new album comes out, you go on YouTube and you can find an individual video for every single song released by the artist, not by somebody that's uploading it and trying to get the music out there. It's on the artist page. It's so interesting that it is a competitor for something like Spotify. Like, I never would have thought of that a couple years ago, but it really is. It is a fascinating thing.
I mean, that's an area where YouTube has struggled, relatively speaking, to tap, because they have, to exactly your point, it's the biggest music service in the world by viewership. But they haven't really turned the dial and flipped the switch to make it something to compete with Spotify and Apple Music. They're trying. Like they have YouTube Music, YouTube Premium. They tried in prior. I read about this a little bit in the book. They tried an earlier attempt. The problem was they didn't know how to categorize what's music. And an example that like one executive brought up was like originally they didn't have the Frozen soundtrack, and he's like, well, to my daughter that's music, and there's a lot of views in the Frozen soundtrack, right? So like I think just the fact that so much of YouTube is like really hard to categorize, but it's even with relatively minimal effort, they are the world's biggest used music service, and probably the biggest podcasting service too.
Sure.
Just because, and they're now taking a much more intentional effort to get podcasts to like, hey, if you're a podcaster, why don't you record a video, and with like a touch of a couple of clicks, you can upload this to YouTube, which is great for YouTube. That is just a lot of hours of footage. They can go to advertisers and say, we want to look at how many hours of footage people watch. It's a thornier content moderation problem too, but like YouTube is still interested in getting as much volume of content as possible.
Sounds kind of like the business model for my big major company that I work for. It's quantity, not quality on some of these things. Like, the more we have, the more we can say we have, but doesn't necessarily mean it's any good.
That is absolutely true.
Well, Mark, I know I only have you for a couple more minutes here, but I want to get a timeline from you really quick of when you started this book and how it came together here. Because I know when I'm talking to an author, generally the book's been done for about a year at the point that I'm speaking to them. So when did you start this, and when did you put the wraps on it?
I started at the very beginning of 2020. I was going out and meeting with former YouTube employees, really giddy to like have all these in-person meetings, and then that clearly ended. And then I actually started, I think Pencils Down was May of this past May, so not a year ago.
Oh, okay.
And I think certainly like maybe the paperback edition could spend more time on TikTok. Like TikTok was kind of growing, but it was hard. It was even, and I mentioned it a little bit in the book, but certainly in the past year, it's just become this phenomenon and really reshaping how YouTube's responding in a way. Yeah, so it's almost 3 years of my life.
Well, you did a fantastic job here. And if you do expand in the paperback version, I can't wait to see what you have to say there, because I love what you've done with this book. Mark Bergen, the book is called Like, Comment, Subscribe, Inside YouTube's Chaotic Rise to World Domination. Is there a place people can go if they want to follow along with you? Or I know you write for different publications as well. So is there a place that they can go to see your other work?
Oh yeah, I primarily with Bloomberg, Bloomberg News, and I'm on Twitter like all of us. MH Bergen, Bergen.
Great. Well, Mark, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for this book. I've always been so fascinated by YouTube, and I love that we have this encyclopedia almost, if you will, of all the information to take us through the history. This is really, really great stuff.
Thanks, Jeff. It was really fun. Appreciate it.
Big thank you to Mark Bergen for his time today. His book, Like, Comment, Subscribe, Inside YouTube's Chaotic Rise to World Domination, is available now wherever you get your books. And thank you to all of you for listening to Adult Education this week. Until next time, be well.